from England, the United Kingdom, the Yellow Submarine. And we had the Beach Boys, which I was very proud of. It's called Surfing USA. And the Mexican one, or even South American one, Ricky Valles with La Bamba. So there was a lot of music in my mind, and so I kind of feel very comfortable about here, and I want to thank Phoenix Clubhouse for the opportunity to speak. So the interesting thing is about in my early childhood or life, I was a tree hugger, and I called myself also an environmentalist. I used to come down here to Ashland to the headwaters meetings. There was Julie Norman from Ashland and Mel Canal from Ashland, and then also Shan Thomas from Applegate, who were running the show. So yeah, I kind of fitted in with those tree huggers. And later on, we had a new lady on the horizon. Her name was Julie Butterfly. She lived for 765 days in a tree to protect the rainforest. And I think that's a lot of credit to her and her support team, because living in the tree is not just living there. You have to have all the supplies of food, etc. So my son and I were quite industrious. We have our own electrical company, limited. And when 1992 came along, we decided we should go to Rio de Janeiro, to the World Conference on the Environment. So we only had one motorcycle, a 250cc, and we both went on the bike in Edmonton, which is about 1,900 kilometers from here, north of the state of Montana. And we drove that motorcycle through the United States all the way down to Miami. And then in Miami, we ended up getting a visa for Brazil. And then we got a plane ticket, and then we arrived in Rio de Janeiro for the World Conference on the Environment. And what really was fascinating in our lives there was the motorcycle held on pretty good. Did I say it was a 250cc, two people? Took over a week to make the trip, an enormous journey, and lots to learn, because I was never down that far before. I spent time in Canada and British Columbia, and also in Quebec and Montreal, and then Vancouver area. So here, being in Brazil, sweating really bad, the very high humidity, and then finally our plane came and we went down to Brazil. So while I was listening to the stories, there was an industrialist on the microphone and talked about that he is an environmental activist. And I thought I was one because I was a tree hugger, blah, blah, blah. No, he says, I invented an electrostatic precipitator, and if there's a large factory somewhere, what we're doing is we're extracting the particles before they go up in the chimney. We have high voltage, and the particles attaching itself to the screen. Then we reverse the polarity from DC, and then the particles fall down, and we have all the pollutants. Rather than going up in the atmosphere, we have them in the half-ton truck, and we haul it away. So he claimed himself to be an environmental activist, and I thought, holy smokes, what a change. So there were all kinds of individual business people who were pretended that we got to do something about climate change, etc., CO2 emission reduction. So when I returned back to Edmonton, the town I live in has 1.5 million people. Calgary is another one just further south, and I live in Edmonton with my son and 2 daughters. So with my friends and associates, we raised $1.5 million, and I took out the electrical permit for the project and supervised the job for the concrete and the delivery of all the various parts to make a wind turbine. So I brought some parts with me here, and I'm going to be not adjusting the microphone, but there's the base. 250 cubic meters of cement was used for that to put the wind turbine footings down. And then the tower is another 45 tons. And we bolt the tower together. It comes in 2 pieces. There we are, 2 pieces. Now there's the tower attached to the footing. And we have 45 shareholders who helped to make this possible, to raise the funds for the project. This is called the generator, the nacelle also. and that's about 17 ton, and it came in from England. Sorry, there's a couple of things. Oh, here we are. These are on the blades, and the three-bladed wind turbine. So I just stick it in here like that, and then you can see each blade is about 27 yards, and when the wind blows, they revolve, and then it produces electric power for the grid. So when you have a regular power plant which burns coal, as an example, every moment that motor is producing electric power, you're burning coal, lots of CO2 in the atmosphere. This wind turbine will run about 25 years without retrofitting, and it uses the energy from the sun, and there's enough energy for 350 households. And this is the car as an example, and I put it on the bottom of the pole so you have an idea. It's about 45 yards, 27 yards here. So there's the car as a relationship, and we were doing that with our own hands kind of thing, and very proud about it. And it's located in Pincher Creek, which is about 40 or 50 kilometers north of the state of Montana, between Idaho, etc. It's a very good wind regime. My son and I started a new company in the state of Oregon, here down in Ashland. And we have 7 anemometers in the valley where we register wind speeds. And in the long run, we hope to put up a wind turbine. But I'm not going to talk about that in detail. But I want to point out to you, during the time while I was raised in Berlin, there was also a shortage of fuel. The war was just finished, and gasoline was very hard to come by. There was an engineer who designed a new pattern. He used wood, and he put wood into a boiler, made a fire underneath, trapped the wood into this container with wing nuts on the top, and created a gas, and then that gas was used to run the truck. So later on, I'll just pass this little sheet of paper around. It's a conventional car with a little attachment to the back, and that's where the near the bumper, that's where the hot water, the hot tank is, and the fire, and it creates the gas to make this unit go. And I figured out, how do you do it? He says, first I started with about half a liter of gasoline, and once the engine's running, then I switch over to this homemade gas. So the other day, Biden, your president, announced a new Tailpipe Emission Act, and he had stated in it that within the next 10 or 12 years, he would like to see all the cars on the road to be electric cars. And so 96% of all cars sold at the moment in the US and also in Canada, for that matter, are internal combustion engines. And so with this tailpipe emission bill, he encourages folks to move in that direction. Today, my son and I went to the off-ramp on exit number 14. The Tesla company put up 24 stations for plugging in electric cars, and that's within 25 or 30 yards of Highway I-5. So when you come in from California or even from the north, from Portland, you can pull in there and then recharge your battery. So I-5 is one of the earliest roads to be converted for the future to be electrified. I'd like to read a little story which I have written here. I actually wanted to read some poetry, and I picked up the wrong file, so I will read a few little lines which I have here, and then my time is up. It is time to pay attention to climate change. Cutting back on CO2 emission is very important. The angels will be very unhappy if we don't do it. The ice and the permafrost are melting very rapidly in Norman Wells and in most northern communities to the Arctic Ocean in Canada. The local native folks know all about it for years. Lip service is what most of are doing. The quick adaptation for the change is very slow, to say the least. Our lifestyle has to change, but how? How do we go about it is the big question. You start up little at a time, my friend. walk or ride a bike and do some snowshoeing instead having a snow machine like a skidoo, which is less gasoline to be purchased, and so on forth, and so forth. Other folks will do the same by and by, one step at a time. We have to get the ball rolling and be a good example all the time. It is important. And there's a lady in Sweden, her name is Greta Thunberg. She's now published a second book dealing with climate change, and I bought the first copy. And what's fascinating about her, she quits school every Friday with all her friends, and that go to the legislature and complain about it, that we need to do something. She's a teenager, and the group she belongs to is called Triple F, Friday for Future. And so she travels just like many of the musicians from town to town, or village to village, or country to country, promoting music, musicians. And for her, it is this environmental activist activity to get folks to jump on the bandwagon or put the shoulder to the wheel for the change. So it's fascinating that her being a teenager, it is there. In my lifetime, the world's population has doubled. So now we have 8.5 billion people already. And so what she's basically saying is what the scientists are saying. The scientists are literally muzzled. They cannot say the things they really want to say publicly. So she is a spokesperson for them. So with that, I want to thank you. You know a little bit about myself. And my son is in the studio right here, Sid Paschen. Thank you very kindly.
Thank you, Jerry. Jerry, go